Alrighty, take number 2. We're going to look at the first dot point now. Glimpse behind the curtain, just when I had dinner. Delicious, thanks for asking. Alright, so we're in the survey, and this is the growth of the European tensions, okay? So this is split up into, I think, 3 dot points. The first one being collapse of collective security in Abyssinia and the Spanish Civil War. So again, collective security, good glossary word straight from the start. Security arrangement, political, regional or global, in which each state in the system accepts that the security of one is the concern of all, and therefore commits to a collective response to threats and breaches to peace. As we saw in our power and authority topic, we saw that from the time that the US refused to join the League of Nations, the League was likely to fail. The League was also based on the unrealistic idea that nations would give up their sovereignty and turn aspects of foreign policy decision-making over to an international body. The collective security principle was contained in Article 10 of the Covenant of the League. It was hoped that aggression or threats of aggression would be discouraged because potential aggressor nations would fear possible collective action being taken against them. Now, that action might involve economic sanctions or collective military action. But as we came to realise, without an army itself, the League of Nations can only recommend or sanction with words. So the economic sanctions, whilst were somewhat effective, were proven to be very, very weak and having no real impact. And without that military action, because no one wanted to go to war, it really just fell flat. So serious doubts existed about the effectiveness of collective security long before Hitler came to power in Germany. Multiple experiences throughout the 20s showed the ineffectiveness of and the eventual collapse of principle of collective security. Again, see Japan's invasion of Manchuria. The last straw for collective security was evident when Italian leader Benito Mussolini invaded Abyssinia. And here's a very poorly taken photo of an excerpt from a textbook that you are welcome to read through in your own time. It just talks about, obviously, where the League of Nations came from, aka President Woodrow Wilson. And then it's kind of philosophy, the principles of internationalism. Let's all be in this together as a counter-offer to nationalism. So take a couple of seconds here. Again, pause the video and answer these 2 questions, then share as a group. How could collective security benefit countries? So what are the pros? How could it be exploited by other countries? What are the cons? And then we're going to move on to that Italian invasion of Abyssinia. So again, this will be on the website. Pause here, jump and go watch that video as an overview, and then come back to this video to watch the rundown of the text. The crisis in Abyssinia from 35 to 36 brought international tension nearer to Europe. It also drove Nazi Germany and fascist Italy together for the first time. The affair once again highlighted the weakness of the League of Nations. Like Britain and France, Italy had joined in the so-called scramble for Africa in the 19th century. So, context for that, with the worldwide global colonialism occurring during those 1800s, each European empire was trying to claim as much of the global territory as they can to build up their raw resources. And Africa as a continent was ripe for the picking by these hoity-toity Westerners with all their technology and racism, to be fair. So they went in and tried to pick up as many of those African nations as they could to build up their empires. And throughout that 19th century, the 1800s, a whole range of European empires was just snapping up parts of Africa. And that's what they call that scramble for Africa. However, the prized territories had been conquered by others, and Italy was left with unimportant areas such as Eritrea and Somaliland. The Italians had attempted to expand in Eastern Africa by joining Abyssinia to her conquests, but in 1896 the Italians were heavily defeated by the Abyssinians at the Battle of Adowa. Now, this is another kind of example of Italy not quite going well at things. I've got to put that delicately. So a little bit slow for the scramble at Africa, didn't get all the good spots. And even then, that battle of Adowa in 1896 was having Italians who assumed that they were capable and well fortified and armed being defeated by these Abyssinian people who were not, in the eyes of Europe anyway, really up to scratch. So this defeat had an enormous impact on Italian pride. They lost 6,000 men against what is a pretty bad term, but a backward army from Abyssinia, so maybe an army that doesn't have the same resources or military capabilities. And that was difficult for the Italian people to comprehend because it was a huge slap in the face. However, this defeat did not stop politicians in Italy planning for a new attempt to take over Abyssinia. They just kind of had their eyes set on it, and it was now their goal. They'd been shamed, they'd been beaten, humiliated, really, and then it kind of stuck. The Italians, at least the leaders of Italy, were like, no, we have to. This is now a blight on our reputation. We have to, at some point, get this back. The desire to show the world how powerful Italy was became the prime motivation of Mussolini, Il Duce. He saw himself as a modern-day Julius Caesar, as we learnt in the core, who would one day be in charge of a vast Italian empire as it existed in the days of Caesar. And in 28, Italy signed a treaty of friendship with Haile Selassie, the leader of Abyssinia, but an invasion of the country was already being planned. So it's kind of shaking hands with the fingers crossed behind the back. Similar to what Hitler did with the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact, kind of knowing that it's going to be broken, but signing it for political capital anyway. In December 1934, Mussolini accused the Abyssinians of aggression at an oasis called Walwal. Again, kind of you shouldn't have done that, so we're going to attack you. He ordered Italian troops stationed in Somaliland and Eritrea to attack Abyssinia in response to that. So, coincidentally, large quantities of ammunition and supplies had been stockpiled there already. In October of 1935, the Italian army invaded Abyssinia. The Abyssinians could not hope to stand up to the modern army, and they were equipped with pre-World War I rifles and little else. The Italians used armoured vehicles and even mustard gas in their attack. The capital, Addis Ababa, fell in May of 36, and Haile Selassie was removed from the throne and replaced by the King of Italy, Victor Emmanuel. Somaliland, Eritrea, and Abyssinia were all united under the name Italian East Africa. When the Italians had invaded in October, the Abyssinians had appealed to the League of Nations. Okay, again, the idea of this is our international body to protect everyone. Surely the League of Nations should do something to protect our sovereignty and not just let a power like Italy do whatever they want. So the League came out and did two huge things. They condemned the attack, which we all know could achieve a whole lot. AKA just words, nothing happened. And ordered all League members... I can correct this on the fly. Ordered all League members to impose economic sanctions on Italy. Now, it took 6 weeks for these sanctions to be organised by the members, and they did not include vital materials such as oil. So the economic sanctions were useless. They would achieve nothing, put no pressure on Italy, and really not kind of criticise them at all. It was very much like don't do this and we're going to sanction you for very little, meaning it made no difference. And 3 League members did not carry out those sanctions, which means they could cover the sanctions imposed on gold and textiles pretty easily because they had other members to help them, whereas a ban on oil could have had a major impact on Italy's war machine. But no sanction on oil means no issues having their army still run. The argument put forward for not banning oil was that Italy would simply get her oil from America, who was a non-League country. So may as well make money off us than just go somewhere else. Britain and France were also concerned about provoking Mussolini in the Mediterranean Sea, where Britain had 2 large naval bases, in Gibraltar and in Malta. In fact, the Italian navy were vastly overestimated by both the British and the French, but it was this fear which also led to Britain to keeping open the Suez Canal. If the route had been cut, then Italy would have had extreme difficulty supplying armed forces in the region during the conflict. So basically, everyone was too worried about themselves to really do anything about it, so they kind of had half-hearted responses. It's also possible that both Britain and France considered the war too far away to be of any importance to them. They were not prepared to risk their naval power in the Mediterranean for the sake of a country barely anybody had heard of in either France or Britain. So politically, it made no sense to kind of huff and puff because the people are like, I don't know what's going on here, so who cares? Britain and France also had another input into this affair. In an effort to the end of the war, the British Foreign Secretary Samuel Hoare and the French Prime Minister Pierre Laval met in December of 1935. They came up with what was called the Hoare-Laval Plan. And in classic British-French politics, they just decided what to do with an area thousands of kilometres away from them. As we saw when we looked at the topic of Palestine. The UN just split it up, doing whatever they want, even against the wishes of the local people. So the Hoare-Laval Plan gave 2 large areas of Abyssinia to Italy and a gap in the middle of the country, which became known as the Corridor of Camels, to the Abyssinians. The south of the country would be reserved for Italian businesses. In return for this land, the Italians would have to stop the war. Which, when you think about it, Italians get given a whole heap of stuff, Abyssinians lose a whole heap of stuff, British and the French feel like they've achieved something, but really they've just helped Italy to no end. Mussolini accepted the plan, of course, because, that's a victory for him. But in Britain, there was a huge national outcry. It was believed that a British government minister had betrayed the people of Abyssinia. The protest caused Hoare to resign, and then the plan was dropped. Mussolini continued with the invasion. However, what this plan had indicated was that the 2 major European League members, Britain and France, were prepared to negotiate with a nation that had used aggression to enforce its will on a weaker nation. Coupled with this, the sanctions failed. So basically what it showed was Britain and France were willing to negotiate with someone who was being the aggressor rather than condemn, or strongly condemn them anyway. Hitler, from afar, was like, ooh, hello. The League's involvement in this event was a disaster. It showed that its sanctions were half-hearted, even when they were enforced. That's a big one there. It showed that nations that its sanctions were half-hearted, even when they were enforced, and that member states were prepared to negotiate with the aggressor nations to the extent of effectively giving in to them. Okay, why does the League of Nations fail? Because their sanctions were half-hearted and they still negotiated with the aggressors. Also, actions by the League, if they were a failure, led to Italy looking away from the League, an organisation it was actually belonging to. Mussolini turned to the man he considered a silly little monkey when they had first met, Hitler and Nazi Germany. So when the League condemned the Italians, he's like, well, I'll go to this other dude, Hitler. All right, some questions to come out of that little section there. What is Abyssinia known as today? When did Italy invade and why? And then have a crack at writing a paragraph on how the invasion of Abyssinia by the Italians highlighted the weakness. Okay, I've given you an example topic sentence here just to really hit the nail on the head for you. All right, start strong in this paragraph. All right, it had major impacts on European affairs, which tested the strength of the League of Nations by chuck it all in there. Okay, and I might pause it there because I feel like that's enough for a period. I'm hoping to be back for you guys Tuesday if we have class. If not, I'm obviously going on the Year 7 camp for the rest of the week, so I'm just going to keep creating these videos to get you through the week because I feel terrible for not being around for you guys for start of a new topic. So you get at least video version of me. So have a crack of those 3 and I'll check back in before we have our next class. Okay, thanks, good luck.